Hey everyone, on this week's episode of Make It with Calvin, we're talking about this. It's the Geeetech UV curing box, and I know what you're saying is, well Calvin, didn't you do a video on this a long time ago? You are correct, I did, but I've made some modifications to this one, and let me get into why. So, let's talk about it. Okay, so first things first with this project, this is not for me. My really good friend Christina is getting into doing various things with resin, and one of them is ultravioletly cured resin for thin parts. Now, flashback to a couple weeks ago, I was doing some dejunking and found some of my old ultraviolet curing lamps. I'm talking like the ones inside the aluminum case that you kind of put inside a makeshift box, and wow, I've got myself a curing chamber. Old school stuff. They're still useful for certain applications, but in my case, I do not do resin printing anymore, so therefore didn't really have a use for it. All that aside though, when I was talking to her, I was like, hey, I found these old lamps. Do you want them? And that kind of started this snowball effect of, well, I've got the lamps, but you kind of need a box to put them in because you can't just set them up on a shelf and bombard the room with UV. It's not exactly the greatest for you or your eyeballs or anything like that. And then I really got to thinking, it's like, well, I could make you a box for it. And then I even mentioned in the chat, I'm like, well, there was the Geeetech UV curing box thing. That was pretty cool. Well, let me see what I can do. So got in touch with one of my contacts over at Geeetech. I explained to her, hey, I have a friend who wants to do ultravioletly cured keychains. Would it be potentially possible to might get a discount on this? And she goes, yeah, sure, I can totally do that for you. Cut me a 50% discount on this. Thank you very much. That was awesome. So once I had this, I obviously assembled it. That was very simple, but there were a couple of modifications that I made. Some of them are application specific. Some of them are just because I'm super extra and that's the way I am, but who cares? But enough blah blah, let's get into it. So the first thing that I did is I relocated the UV light strip from being on the back here to being on the roof. Obviously, because she is going to be curing flat items, I want all that UV just yeeting straight down onto the items. I figured that will probably give the best results. It's not like we're trying to cure, oh, we'll just use this cap here, where you want it more hitting from the sides. So that was pretty simple. I just modeled up the basic rectangular shape of this, popped 2 holes in it using the laser cutter. If you don't have a laser cutter, you can drill the holes. Just be careful. It is acrylic and it will crack if you're not careful. Ideally, you want to use a 60-degree drill bit when you're drilling it. If you don't have that, there's videos on how to work around that. Just be careful. So with the UV light repositioned, I did have to extend the wires a little bit. So I just spliced some longer wires in there. Not super hard. Again, something where, depending upon your skill level, there are various workarounds, including those little heat connectors, or just finding a makerspace and somebody to solder it for you. Soldering is a very good skill. Take it from me. So moving on from that, we now move down to the platform. Now, the one thing I didn't really like about this is the fact that the platform is a little bit wibbly wobbly. I feel like, you know, a 5 cent 3D printed part would help. But in my case, I just took some 1/8 inch acrylic and then some about 60 thousandths cardboard and just cut those in a donut shape, unscrewed the disc, popped them underneath, and now it provides a stable platform because she's going to be putting liquid in there. It's not like a, you know, semi-rigid part where it will keep its shape, and if it wobbles a little bit, that might actually be advantageous for hitting certain areas. In this case, I want to keep it as flat as possible, so that way you don't have a bunch of excessive spilling. So I installed that underneath. That's a very easy part that you could 3D print or something like that. So that was mostly just to brace up the bottom of this. Very simple. Now we come to the last 2 things. One of them I think was actually a very good idea, and that was I made a little TPU latch here on the top. Now, if you are curious about this, I will have a link to where you can purchase the files for this. It's very cheap. It just helps support the channel and all that good stuff. But Whoops, sorry about that. The advantage of this is obviously it physically latches the door in place, which is one thing I didn't like about the original was there was no mechanism to hold it. I mean, it definitely has the door safety switch, which I really appreciate, but that only does so much good when you got light going yeet out the top. And I also figured that light that's going out is light that's not staying inside curing things, and we want as much UV blasting things on the inside. So lastly, this was just me being super extra because I can, but I engraved Christina's logo on a custom front door for this thing. So what I did is I took the dimensions of the original front door. I had some white 1/8 inch acrylic. I happened to have her logo and literally went into Illustrator, scaled it, drew it, threw it on the K40, raster engraved all this in here. I kept the protective paper tape on here, did that, took it outside, sprayed it down with some clear finish to seal all the edges because obviously paint likes to wick into things via capillary action. Then let that dry, hit it with a couple of coats of black spray paint, let that dry, peeled the paper off, and that's what I ended up with. And yeah, let me just say, when I sent her the photo of that, I definitely know what was happening on the other end of that phone. So that is this project in a nutshell. Now, I know what some of you are going to be saying is, well, Calvin, why don't you just build your own box? You put a lot of effort into this. And yeah, I totally could have built my own box, but I'm also someone who understands that sometimes it is easier to modify an existing item than it is to try and build something entirely from scratch. The other reason why I chose this is I knew that it had the timer unit. And sure, I could have told Christina, yeah, you also gotta, source yourself a timer unit for the lights and trying to figure all that stuff out because you want to try and run it for a consistent period of time. And I'm like, you know what? No, we need to do this right here. So that's the reason why I did this. And like I said, the custom front door was just me being extra. It does not need that to function, but let's face it, it looks stupidly awesome. Okay, now as for me, I got to figure out how to get this over to her, and I am not flying it out to her and all that stuff, but yeah, we'll see. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any questions or comments about this project, let me know. And no promises, but I will see if Christina at some point in the future can actually film something and send it to me so I can show this beast of a machine in action. All right, catch you guys later.